Welcome into episode 448 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, before we get into this podcast, I want to quickly say Geico can save you 15% or more on car insurance for all those who haven't seen that enough in the YouTube ads that Bridget, I saw you mentioned on the last episode. We have no control of that. And for the record, any video that I watch regarding hockey or anything New England sports related on my YouTube algorithm, I get the same damn commercial. So I absolutely empathize with our viewers on YouTube because, man, does that commercial suck.
Yeah, I felt bad. I was like, do they think we're doing this? Because we post and we kind of just have to let YouTube do what they do and put ads where they want to put the ads. And yeah, I do feel bad. We apologize. There's really nothing we can do though.
Yeah, we don't get to pick the ads, so
nor like how many ads play. I don't know if that's like a company thing that we're like, yeah, play all the I don't know. All I know is I post the video, it has no ads in it, and then when you watch it back, it has ads. So yes, Brian, that's funny to mention. And I did try to explain in the comments.
Is today's episode brought to you by Portugal though, Scott? I see you repping. Is there some international soccer going on?
Yeah, UEFA Nations League champions. Portugal beat Spain Sunday on penalty kicks. Great game.
I saw Ronaldo post about it. That's how I knew.
Yeah, he scored the tying goal and then left injured, so he wasn't actually on for extra time and penalty kicks. But it's weird. Like, no Stanley Cup final game this weekend. Obviously, Friday night was game 2. Now we have game 3 coming up Monday night. But Sunday, sneaky great sports day.
Oh my God, I watched the French Open for like 6 hours.
So good. What an incredible match that was.
I love tennis. That's my other sport that I follow like pretty much as closely as hockey. And I was rooting for Alcaraz, and I was so impressed with the comeback that he made, and he won. I was the biggest Nadal fan. That's why now I kind of like transferred over to Alcaraz because he's like his little prodigy. But no, that was crazy. I felt like I wasted my whole morning though. Just like
I was
3 p.m. and I'm like, I just watched tennis the entire morning.
I know, like I was going over to my parents just to like hang out in the afternoon and have dinner. And I was like, oh, I'll watch tennis first and then head over and like probably have soccer on my phone or something. And I had to leave between like the 4th and 5th sets because I'm like, this is still going and it's probably going to be another hour. So like I'll head over and I'll watch the end over there. But yeah, I mean, exciting new era of tennis.
Yeah.
With the big 3 kind of, 2 of them at the end and Djokovic probably getting close to the end.
Well, this summer and subsequent summers and seasons will tell us if we're embarking on a new exciting era in Boston Bruins hockey, which is why our listeners are here. As much as I'm sure that our Bruins fans love international soccer and
do they want me to talk more about tennis?
we'll put a poll up and yeah. We'll have a mailbag section strictly dedicated for non-Bruins sports topics. I'm sure they'll love that. But Bridget and Scott, of course, we are a Bruins podcast. So despite them not playing and have not been playing for the last couple of months, we have some opening shifts to get to and plenty to talk about today. So let's get right into it. Scott, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think there's some kind of leftover thoughts from the hiring of Marco Sturm, which Bridget and I covered a lot on our previous podcast. And coming up later this week, we'll have reactions to Sturm's introductory press conference, which is set for Tuesday over at the Garden. But what I want to touch on is some of the reaction to it, which on sports radio was largely negative, which should come as a surprise to no one. But I think among fans, it was more indifference is how I would describe it, where, like just to take one example, our own Andy Hart, co-host of WEI Afternoons, put up a poll on, I think this was on Friday, gauging fan reaction. And the options were love it, meh, hate it. So simple 3 options. And 78% was meh. Just like and that was like 16% love, 6% hate. And I think it's really interesting. And I get why, because I think a lot of fans just don't know enough about Marco Sturm as a coach. Like, it's just not, he's not a well-known commodity in this capacity. I do think fans obviously remember him as a player for the Bruins, but he hasn't been in this organization. He hasn't been in the NHL. So I think fans probably lost track of what he was doing and, maybe haven't fully read up on it or listened to a podcast like ours that, hopefully provides some background. But I think part of it also is, and Brian, you touched on this on Twitter a bit, is people just aren't going to give Don Sweeney any benefit of the doubt either. So I think there's also some apathy because of who is doing the hiring, where the reaction is almost as much about Sweeney and Cam Neely as it is about Marco Sturm himself. So, I'm curious to kind of get you guys' thoughts on some of the reaction we're seeing and just sort of where the fan base is, where at the very least, I think it's safe to say there's not a ton of excitement over this hire.
I think Sweeney could have hired anyone and it would have had the meh or dislike reaction, but we'll get into that. My opening shift has to do with something I brought up at the end of the last podcast. And it was part of the conversation that we're having about Sam Bennett and, are certain players that the Bruins could bring in as a center, a top six forward, like overpriced or who's available, who should they be going after? And this is actually a player who is not going to be a free agent, but it seems like there's more and more smoke that this player is available, and it's known behind the scenes. But Elias Pettersson comes up again this week as somebody that, if you're willing to, give a phone call and give a good offer, maybe you can get him as your number one center. His contract is about $11.5 million. It's a very long contract you'd have to take on. I think it goes past 2030. But if you think he could be a number one center for you, we'll discuss. Is this a specific player that maybe they say no to Marner, no to Bennett? Actually, Elias Pettersson fits more what we are looking for. So I wanted to bring that up as a possibility, just because we talked about the free agents quite a bit. But there's potentially a number one center out there as an option in the trade.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to with that. And ironically enough, I believe I posted a poll on Twitter about should the Bruins trade for Elias Pettersson, just conceptually. And I'll save the results and the feedback for later in the episode. But I think I did that without even realizing that there may have been an article out there about the availability of Pettersson possibly. So it was kind of just ironic the way that it happened. But there's a lot to get to there. And it's going to be important to talk about both sides of the aisle. Why fans, there's risk all around. There's risk with acquiring a talent like that. There's risk with not being opportunistic and acquiring a talent like that. And we'll get into all of that. But the NHL Combine was this week for the draft prospects. And there's some news to come out of there, just subtle news. How did players perform? Roger McQueen, for example, is a prospect that the biggest knock on him, because you hear a lot of people saying, man, he could be the best talent in this draft, but his back issues, his health concerns, it hinders teams wanting to take a risk on him. Well, he had a very healthy and strong performance at the Combine. So how does that affect his draft ranking? Brady Martin is a player that has not been talked about up until recent, I would say the last month, ever since, what tournament was it, Scott, in Texas?
It was the U18 World Championships.
So prior to then, he was definitely viewed as a good prospect, but he started to garner some chatter about maybe he should go top 10. Well, there were multiple teams that took Brady Martin out for dinner at the Combine, which the Bruins were one of them. The other three teams that took him out to dinner all select before the Bruins. So perhaps he's a player that shakes up the draft board, and all these picks that we've talked about in our draft exercise that we did. Players can slide, and we've talked about that before. But anyway, so there's a lot to talk about, and I also posted a video on Twitter of the Bruins director of amateur scouting, Ryan Nadeau, and he was interviewed at the draft Combine. NATO?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
Get your French right, Brian.
Ryan Nato. Well, the first thing that when Scott says that, I started thinking about the European alliances. But anyway, so he talked about it was a 16-minute interview. I just clipped a small portion of it, but he talked about many things. He talked about the prospect of players sliding in the draft. He talked about the relationship between NHL Central Scouting's draft board and their analysis and that of the NHL teams. And it's a really good interview. If you want to check that out, it kind of gives you puts you into the mind of the Bruins, which many fans would probably say, I don't want to be in their minds because they suck at drafting and developing. And I'm not here to convince you otherwise, but if you are interested in the video, you can check that out.
Well, I thought one of the most interesting things that Nato said, and he mentioned this multiple times, was in his mind, and I guess, by proxy in the Bruins' mind, that there's something close to a consensus top 3, which is a little different from how I think a lot of people see the draft, because what you hear a lot is there's a consensus top 2 of Matthew Schaefer and Michael Misa, and then it kind of opens up. So he didn't say obviously who those 3 are, but I'm really curious, who the Bruins think is the third guy that they expect to go high and
Higgins,
not really have a chance to fall. It could be Higgins or it could be Frundell, who is seems to be stock on the rise again. Frundell, really all the top guys by all accounts seem to have really good combines and impress teams, both in terms of the physical workouts, but also in the interviews. And Frundell was one of them. I guess by all accounts, he has a great personality and is really engaging in those interviews. And he also he entered with questions about how in shape he is and endurance and those kind of things. And then he posted the best score in the stationary bike testing, which is the test of endurance and recovery. So all of a sudden he really kind of shut up those questions. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because I'm he's talking as if it's oh yeah, it's the same top 3 everyone has. And it's is that how more teams are viewing it? Maybe differently in the public, where one of Higgins or Frundell is this clear number 3? Because you don't really see that in a lot of rankings or from kind of the prospect analysts.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird because the combine, you get little bits and pieces of everything, and then you have to try to read between the lines of a lot of it. But especially with the Bruins, we talked about it, they're wrapping up their coaching search, and they're also trying to talk to prospects, who are they bringing to dinner? How did interviews go with certain players? And, because they are picking at number 7, that they've had to be talking to some of the guys in that range. And Brian, you mentioned there, or was it you, Scott? Who is the one player we know they went to dinner with?
Brady Martin.
So, and that is also where some of the I've seen excitement online on Twitter and just people being oh, he'd be a good Bruin. There's certainly, when that name comes up, there's certainly people that would be excited to see him go there. And you wonder where the shuffling happens and how people do when they're, just on a personal level, having a conversation. Do they talk themselves up or down? Is somebody so good, their personality is so good, or they mesh so well with a certain management group that they're all of a sudden they're bouncing up a spot or down a spot because of, certain things. So the other thing I thought was interesting was that McQueen, we had talked about his health and, where he was in that. And it looks like he would put up a really healthy combine. And so that's a player who we said some scouting sites, some sites that put up their, their draft orders had him top 5. And then others had him below 10 because of the health concerns and his injury history. And we had talked about him as maybe a possibility to fall to the Bruins there, even though some people thought he could have been the number 1 pick in this draft if he had a healthy career over the last few seasons. So good to see that he's healthy, but maybe that means if the Bruins wanted him, he doesn't fall to them. We'll see.
But that means that somebody else that the Bruins or Bruins fans didn't think could fall to them would now fall to them. I mean, McQueen, the knock on McQueen has not been his skill. I mean, Chris Peters is very in tuned, very plugged in with NHL prospects, and he, among others, have said that McQueen is looked upon as one of the few players in this draft who actually does, at least at this stage in analyzing players, have 1C potential in the NHL. The other ones I imagine being Hagens and probably Misa, but it's the injury issues that have kept him down in the rankings. So it's interesting. It's interesting. As far as Brady Martin goes, the other flip side to it, Bridget, is because you say some fans think that he plays like a Bruin style of hockey, which you'll get pushback immediately from people saying, what even is Bruin style of hockey these days? We haven't seen that type of Bruins team in a while. But the other fans would say, we're sick of seeing Boston draft players that are supposed to be grinders and hard-nosed players and, high floor, low ceiling talent. Go and get the high ceiling talent that might be a little riskier. Although I wouldn't say Brady Martin has any less risk than, say, like a Jake O'Brien or whatever. But you get my point. So there's always going to be people that are indifferent. I would like to see Brady Martin as a Bruin, or I like to see the Bruins draft somebody with more offensive upside.
Yeah, and I mean, on Brady Martin, like, wanted to pull up Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects. He did a couple post combine write ups, but one of them on Brady Martin, like, talk about stock rising. He had these two things to say about Brady Martin. First was, word around the campfire is that Utah really likes Brady Martin. Wouldn't be shocking to see him go at number 4. And then he also added in his write up, it feels like the floor for Brady Martin to be drafted is the Bruins at number 7. So all of a sudden, like, this idea that, like, I think even just a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Brady Martin, it was, would he be maybe a reach at 7? Like, would there be someone better on the board? And now it's like, is he even going to last till 7? Like, Utah taking him at 4, it's like, it sounds crazy just based on, like, all the conversations everyone's had about who's going in the top 5, but it's really not that crazy when you consider, as we've talked about, like, how much uncertainty and variance there is after the top 2, or I guess if you're Ryan Nadeau after the top 3, but like,
Nadeau, it's Ryan Nadeau, Scott.
But yeah, it's like, I don't know, like, is it that crazy for Brady Martin to go 4th overall? Like, doesn't seem like it. And even after that, it's like, it seems like Nashville likes him and Philly likes him. And if people are calling the Bruins his floor, then that to me reads like a situation where it's like, if he's there at 7, the Bruins are taking him. So,
yeah. Sorry, Scott. Yeah, I was just gonna say, additionally, like, to your point about Utah, they are in a different situation than, say, the Bruins, because and some of the other teams that are drafting in the top 10, because Utah, by all accounts, they have their present and future number 1 center in former number 3 overall pick Logan Cooley, who is 21 years old, just put up 65 points last year. So if you're Utah, you're not looking at Brady Martin as, we're drafting him to be our number 1 center, hopefully, like the Bruins could be thinking. There's less risk for them. They could see Brady Martin as, we just want him to come in and be a really strong power forward of the future for us, whether he's on the wing or a center. Either way, like, Utah, don't forget, they were supposed to be picking, how many spots did they jump up? 10?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
they went 14 to 4.
Yeah.
So again, like, and also there's been rumors of them possibly moving down in the draft from their fourth overall pick potentially. But yeah, if you're them, like, I just think there's less pressure on them to pick Martin, because if he doesn't pan out as a number 1 center, well, guess what? They're not picking him to be the number 1 center. That's Logan Cooley. So they're in a different situation than the teams around them, where you could see easily why they would pick him.
Yeah, and you can also start to see, like, why James Higgins might even if there is kind of this, I don't know if it's consensus or this thought that Higgins is, the number 3 guy, you can still see why he might slip. Like I think it was Cam Robinson who wrote this as well. Basically outlining like what each team could be looking for. And it's like, all right, well, would Chicago take Higgins when they already have Connor Bedard? That would be 2 smaller playmaking type centers to build around. Obviously, Bedard even more skilled, but wouldn't they want some different attributes to add to their team? And then same thing with Utah at 4. Logan Cooley is another sub 6-foot center, actually someone that Higgins gets compared to quite a bit. With everything you hear about Utah is like they want to add size and physicality to their team. So are they going to draft James Higgins and now be building around 2 smaller, kind of less physical centers? Doesn't really seem like it. So that's why you hear about, Brady Martin there, or even Caleb Denwaier, who's, a little bigger and more of a two-way player. That's why you hear about Anton Frundell to Chicago, where, he has a little more size, he's more of a shooter. That would seem to complement Bedard, or, whether he's the number 2 center behind him or even playing wing on a line with Bedard. Like, so you can see how Higgins maybe slips to 5. And then, possibly even further than that. Like, I don't think it's
McQueen's healthy, so do people want McQueen's upside?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so I think we're like once again back to like, 3 through 10 is like a total toss up. Like anyone telling you like who's gonna still be there when the Bruins are on the board is lying to you, because there is absolutely no way to know that right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bridget, go ahead. No, all you. You were going first.
I was gonna I think mine's slightly off topic, so you go.
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like I could see Higgins going number 1 overall to the Islanders because he's from there, and you could see the need for him, right? Like okay, they have Matthew Barzal, but I mean, don't look now, but Barzal's in his late 20s, mid-late 20s, so
yeah, and he plays more wing than center nowadays, anyways.
So you could see the Islanders wanting Higgins as that number 1 center, of the future, and obviously people think that they might go Schaefer, but I could see them going with Higgins more so than I could see 2 through 5 going for Higgins. So for me, if Higgins doesn't go 1 and the Islanders do take Schaefer or Misa or somebody else, I could see if it's not 1 for Higgins, it could be 6, it could be 7, like that, and that does speak to the draft just being kind of a crapshoot. I mean, I look at Chicago, right? And I see Porter Martone as a power forward wing and to play with Connor Bedard for the next 10, 15 years, right? That could be a good fit for them. It's interesting for me. If Higgins doesn't go 1, I'm fascinated to see where he goes. But one thing is for sure, and then Bridget, please don't forget what you were going to say. But I just can't come back to this. Like, the Bruins are going to end up with a great prospect. Like, Brady Martin wasn't even somebody we were talking about a month ago, and Roger McQueen has always just kind of had that asterisk of like he could be the best player in this draft potentially, but his injuries don't seem to be an issue. So now you got 2 prospects in McQueen and Martin that could very well go in the top 5, let alone the top 10. And now some of the previous top 7 players we were talking about, a couple of them could slide down to Boston. So it's who knows what happens in a few weeks.
Yeah, and you hear like certain teams are high on Denwaier too. Like, is he somebody they choose over any of those guys that you just mentioned? Or like I had heard right as we were finishing up, like the day or 2 after the draft lottery, that there was a lot of buzz about teams, one of those top 3 teams wanting Denwaier. So who knows? Like, he could come to the Bruins at 7, or he could go 3rd, or there's options for all of these players. And that's why the combine this year, we have more attention on it than normal, because obviously the Bruins have a really high pick. But there's also just so much fluctuation in where people think. And it's so center heavy too. Like, most of the players we're talking about are all centers. And the question is just, can the Bruins get one that has the upside of a number 1C there, or are they going to get, a tier down from that at number 7? So that's why it's such an important pick for them. What I was going to say was, and this is more of a just like, I guess, just a point about the process of all these interviews that management's doing and when they talk to players. But I saw that the Ottawa Senators reportedly asked players to tell them a joke in their interviews, like in their conversations. And at first I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But then I realized, like, that is stupid, because I don't know about you guys. You could be the funniest people in the world. If you were asked on the spot to tell a joke, would you fail or would you succeed? Like, Brian, tell us a joke.
Why the turtle cross the road?
Why?
To get to the Shell station.
There you go. There you go. He's got one. Scott, where's yours?
I don't have one. I would stumble over my words.
Me too. I don't have one. I can be funny in context, like in a conversation, but
yeah, along those lines, another funny one I saw was,
well, first of all, Brian's going number 1 overall, so he's getting drafted higher than us
just lock
too.
it in.
My go-to is going to be the 24-25 Bruins season, but I didn't want to go there.
Well, I saw people comment the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, if you say the Toronto Maple Leafs is the joke, then you're automatically drafted by Ottawa.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. No, but along the same lines, another funny one I saw was, I don't know what team it was, but someone said there was a team that was asking prospects, and this is like a pretty dark hypothetical, was you're on an island with one other person and there's only enough food for one of you to survive, and you have a baseball bat. What do you do? And Caleb Denwyer said, I'd hit a home run.
I like that kid.
That was really a question, huh?
Apparently.
Wow, that's funny.
Well, honestly, I feel like they need to get sent to HR for that question. That is ridiculous. Would you kill the other person? What the hell is that? What's the right answer?
You gotta find out if a guy has a killer instinct.
You know what's funny too is for Bruins fans who haven't heard Caleb Denwyer speak, or maybe if the Bruins draft him, you'll hear him. But he has a very, very thick French accent, French Canadian accent. So I would imagine him even saying that would have been even funnier. Just with his accent, that would have, not that French Canadian accents are funny. Just anyway.
No. He seems like, from the interviews I've seen, he actually seems like a really nice kid. So I feel like he wasn't gonna be like, I'd fucking kill him. Like, he's just too nice as well. But I hate that even more.
Meanwhile, Brady Martin was probably like, yeah, I'd kill him, then I'd keep beating him with the bat.
Yeah.
Yes. But Bridget, you bring up good points though.
Psychopath, we're not drafting you.
Bridget, you bring up good points though, just in general. We tend to look at draft boards, what scouts and analysts have to say. We have our own opinions based off of our own diligence. But one thing that analysis can't capture is how they are as people behind the scenes, and that interpersonal connection that these draft prospects make with these teams throughout, I would imagine, the whole process of their draft eligible year, but also specifically like the draft combine and whatnot. So that does play a big factor, like 1,000%. It's not on the stat sheet, but it's the intangibles where a GM is looking at a player and saying, yeah, this kid, like picturing him 5 years down the line in a playoff series, like not a fresh-faced 18-year-old kid or 17-year-old kid, but picturing him at 25 years old with a playoff beard in middle of June, and is this guy somebody that we want in our franchise, right? Like, these are things that we have to take into account as well. It's why you see players go higher than expected or lower. It's just, and this draft in particular, I think, has all the opportunity to be a pretty crazy first round. And actually, and just because we've been spending so much time on the draft and the prospects because of the Bruins stance this year, I'm actually very fascinated to see what teams pick which players, because we're all so familiar now with all these top 10, 12 prospects. It'll be very interesting to watch, just from a hockey perspective, like which of these prospects these teams all decide to draft. It'll be very fascinating because we've pictured all these players, maybe less so Misa and Schaefer, but we've pictured the rest of them walking across that podium with a Bruins jersey on because there's a possibility of it. But so it'll be interesting to see those players obviously end up with the team that they do end up with. So it'll be fascinating. I think it's June 27th, right? So it's coming quickly. But did you guys have any further thoughts on the combine before we go into some other topics today?
No, I will say we've gotten a request to, I think this was in one of the mailbags at some point, to do another mock draft or mock top 10 closer to the draft, which I think we will do.
Definitely. We'd like to do that. Okay, so why don't we go over to, let's save the Sturm stuff for afterwards. Let's go to the Elias Pettersson stuff real quick, because this notion of bringing in a talent like Elias Pettersson could very well come at the cost of Boston's first round pick in 2025. Not for certain, but I would imagine that might be in play. Now, I'm gonna pull up the Twitter poll that I sent out, but basically, we all know why Elias Pettersson might not be somebody that Bruins fans would want to bring in. He has some red flags surrounding his character. Everybody knows about the drama that took place in Vancouver the last few years with JT Miller. The Canucks trade JT Miller to the Rangers. Elias Pettersson continues to have a down year. So people question, despite his skill, people question his work ethic, his character, his give a shit meter, quite frankly. And he obviously signed a long-term contract extension for, was it 11.9 million?
11.6.
So he signs that contract, and there's a lot of people out there who say, this kid's just cashed in. He doesn't care. He's not somebody we want in the Boston Bruins organization. We don't want him. So I'm not even here to dismiss or discredit that side of the aisle. But what I am going to do right now is play devil's advocate and explain what the risk would be of not bringing in a 1C talent of Elias Pettersson. Number one, he's 26 years old. Okay, so he's young. He's still young. But you bring him in, and all of a sudden, Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak have a guaranteed 1C talent to play with throughout the primes of their careers. And there's no guarantee that the Bruins draft this player at 7 overall in June and that player becomes a 1C talent for the Boston Bruins. And if he does, is he even half the talent that Elias Pettersson, who's still only 26, is at the NHL level?
And is that 2 years, 3 years?
Well,
many years from now?
And that's exactly it, Bridget. And how old are Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak when this player does become a 1C talent, if they ever do, right? So essentially, you don't want to jeopardize the primes of David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy going without having a 1C, true 1C talent. Now, whether you think Pettersson is good enough to beat Alex Barkov in a playoff series, that's all a different type of conversation. But if the Bruins don't, if the opportunity was there for the Bruins to bring in Pettersson and they don't, and the Bruins continue to not be very good, eventually Pastrnak and McAvoy are going to look around and say, hey, we know that we have no movement clauses, but guess what? We want to move. We want to go play for a team that is competitive and that can win a Stanley Cup, because we are in our early 30s now. And it's a risk that the Bruins would take by not bringing in a guaranteed 1C talent if we're talking strictly skill. So and there's more to it. I'll let you guys go, but I think that's a good starting point, I think, and we'll go from here.
Yeah, I think it's a similar discussion to pursuing Mitch Marner in free agency. Now, obviously, different positions, and Pettersson fits a bigger need as a center, but similar in the sense of you're committing a lot of money and a lot of years to him. In this case, you also have to give up something valuable to get him beyond just paying him. And questions about character and whether or not this is a guy you build a Stanley Cup winner around, because ultimately that's the goal, right? Like we can say, yeah, the Bruins need to add talent and they need a 1C, and that's all true. But if you're bringing in Elias Pettersson, he's also one of your foundational building blocks, along with Pasternak, McAvoy, Swayman, maybe someone else you add somewhere down the line. And just like Marner, there are legitimate questions there about whether he's the kind of guy that you want to do that with. Do you want to hitch your wagon to Elias Pettersson, who has these questions about work ethic and compete level and whether or not he's a playoff performer and just how much he cares? And similar to Marner, there are also questions about whether he would even be a fit in this market, because that seems to be part of the problem. Just like Marner might be sick of Toronto and all the attention there, Vancouver is another, because it's a Canadian market and one of the biggest cities in Canada. I know it's way out west, so we don't follow it as closely, but that is another hotbed where you are constantly under the microscope. And there's a sense of like, is he going to want to just go to a quieter market where there's not as much attention, pressure, criticism, which obviously Boston is not that. Boston is another hotbed where you're going to constantly be under the microscope.
Yep, got 2 talk radio stations that are ready to pull you apart at any point in time. By what I can understand, still nothing compared to Toronto, though. Though we've never lived that life, I guess we kind of got a taste of it during Four Nations, and I was like, oh, I can see why they don't like this. But yeah, there's the concerning parts about, why did that feud with JT Miller start, and was like, who did everybody side with? Was there one guy that was, it kind of seemed like JT Miller got moved because they decided, okay, maybe he was the one that was causing more of a problem, or maybe they just didn't want to get rid of their more talented player, or maybe there was more interest in JT Miller than there was in Pettersson at the price point that I'm sure they were asking for at the trade deadline. But certainly a lot of questions. The thing that would be hard would be, like you mentioned, Scott, this isn't just a money thing. You have to part with assets to get this player. And I mean, you trade that number 7 overall pick for sure. Like that, is that an easy thing for you guys if they say, hey, we want 7 overall and what?
So I think it would be fairly easy for me if it was just number 7, but it's going to be more than that. So I guess what it comes down to is what is the other stuff?
Right. And we can talk about that. And again, I understand that right now, Bruins fans, it's easy to sit here and say, no, fuck Pettersson. He's not a good guy in the room. He doesn't work hard. We don't want him around here. Draft number 7 overall, make some free agent additions, whatever, and start to build something. But here's the problem. Focus on the future, right? But here's the problem. The Bruins can't just focus on the future when 2 of your top players, your 2 franchise players, are in their primes. If David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy were 23 and 24 right now, it's way easier to pass on the risk of Pettersson and take number 7 overall. But they're not. Pastrnak is 29. Charlie McAvoy turns 28 in December. So entering next season, they're already approaching their 30s. You don't have the luxury of time to wait for number 7 overall to potentially become a number 1 center. And when is that? And how old are McAvoy and Pastrnak then? There's risk there. Just like there's risk. If you're somebody who's at home or in the car listening and you're saying trade McAvoy and Pastrnak, I don't care, then God bless you. I think you're probably one of the few people saying that. But realistically, that's not happening. So you want to try to find a number 1 center talent that aligns with the careers of David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy, who still have a lot, they still have half the football field to go. Okay. But by the time this number 1 center comes in, are they in the red zone? Like, that's the problem here. So, and the other thing is, well, Brian, draft number 7 overall, forego Pettersson, so you still get number 7 overall in your system, and then in 2026, make a run at Eichel or McDavid. Okay. Well, I don't think Connor McDavid is going to make it to 2026 free agency, and if he does, the Oilers are going to make him the highest paid player of all time, and McDavid is going to stay. Eichel might not make it to 2026 free agency either. If he does, then there is something to be said there for him, because you can make the argument to me that Jack Eichel would like to come home for the second half of his career on a big payday long-term contract and play for the Boston Bruins. I could see that. I really could. But the point is here, that's a year away, and that's anything but a guarantee. And that's why this question is so polarizing, because yeah, you could tell me, Brian, draft 7 overall and hope for Eichel. But that's exactly it. You're hoping for Eichel, and you're hoping 27's the number 17 pick turns into something. But Pettersson, you get him right now, you know that based on pure talent, he is a one center in this league, and he's only 26 years old. So I think it's a fascinating toss-up question, and I will read you guys the results quickly before I forget, and then let you guys go off. But there were over 1,700 votes, and 43% said yes, 57% said no. I can't promise you that all 1,700 plus voters were critically thinking and analyzing this question very, very detailed. A lot of it was just reactionary and whatnot. But hey, the votes are the votes.
Yeah, and like that, but that's going to be, any big move. A lot of it is going to be reactionary. Like, I don't expect fans to do hours of homework on guys and dive into every analytics and all that stuff. Like, yeah, the reaction is going to be the reaction. So I do think that's a pretty good gauge, though, of like where fans would kind of come down on it, which is at best it would be split, and it may very well lean negative to people not liking this move. However, it would end up looking in terms of the trade package. I outlined my questions that I have about him, just like I have questions about Mitch Marner. But Brian, like, as you've kind of touched on too, like this is another point I've made in the Marner discussion is beggars can't be choosers. Like, you can't just wait for the perfect superstar, because you may very well end up waiting 4 or 5 years. And like you said, by that point, Pasternak and McAvoy want out. The position you're in, like at some point, the Bruins are going to have to take a chance on someone. And it might not be Pettersson, it might not be Marner, but it's going to have to be someone here in the next couple of years. And I'm with you. Connor McDavid's not getting to free agency. The Oilers will gladly make him the highest paid player ever well before he gets there. And I don't think Jack Eichel is either. I said this before, but from everything I've heard, he's very happy in Vegas. They love him there. Obviously, he helped them win a Stanley Cup. I find it hard to believe he's not going to re-sign before he gets to free agency. But look, if he does, you can cross that bridge when you get there. Like, in the meantime, I just don't think that's a real plan to just say, well, we're just going to hope Jack Eichel gets to free agency next summer. Like,
and there's another wrinkle. You just this past offseason signed a guy to be your number 1C. Then you have, what happens to Elias Lindholm. I know obviously you got to figure they can find a way to move him or do.
Well, you're not paying him real number 1 center money. Like,
no, that's the other thing is like his contract is not 11.6 million a year the way that Pettersson is getting paid like a number 1C. But you've tried to plug this hole, and I bring up Elias Lindholm because maybe they look at the situation and go, you know what? We're going to ride it out with our choice. This was the guy that we identified. He started playing better at the end of the season. He played good at Worlds, and we think he's going to have a turnaround year, and we think that he's good enough to fill that void right now. We don't actually need to go out and do something risky and give up assets to go after Pettersson instead.
So that last word that you said, though, that risky, that's the key word for me. What is the bigger risk? That's essentially the question I want fans to answer, which is, what's the bigger risk? Is the bigger risk going out and acquiring Elias Pettersson, okay, and having to give up the capital to do so? Maybe that's 7 overall, in addition to maybe a Lori or a Potter or whatever, right? You acquire that player. Now, Elias Pettersson, as I said, he's 26 years old. He's played 471 games in the National Hockey League. He has 457 points and is a plus 46. Yes, he has character issues. So that's so far. We don't know the details of it, but we've heard character issues. So the risk is bringing him in and him not being a fit and partying with the number 7 overall pick that turns out to be great potentially and all that stuff. So there's that risk. Or is the bigger risk, like I said, you don't bring him in, the number 7 overall pick ends up being a second line winger. You never get McDavid or Eichel, and you're trying to figure out between Lindholm or Zach or whomever is going to be the true number 1 center for this Bruins team in the prime years of David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy, and you never adequately fill that role. If Elias Pettersson was 35, I'd sit here and say, I mean, he's 35 years old. Like he's 26. The kid is still entering his prime. So like he's the age. He's not much older right now than the number one, whoever they pick at number 7. By the time that player potentially becomes an NHL player, and even then, they probably still have some developing to do. The difference is Pettersson is aligning with McAvoy and Pasternak's prime. Okay, let's round this episode out with some of the Marco Sturm reaction that Scott brought up in his opening shift. And Scott, it was your opening shift, so I'll throw it back to you to reset the table.
Yeah, just to refresh people, like I'm just interested in the reaction and kind of how much indifference there seems to be from a lot of Bruins fans, and just sort of a lack of excitement around this, which I get to an extent because Marco Sturm has never been an NHL head coach before, so there's always going to be questions with someone like that. And I couldn't help but like kind of shake my head at some of the more negative reaction from media types on both our station and 98.5, and even on TV. I heard some of it on NBC Sports Boston, which is interesting because it's like the biggest criticism seems to be, oh, he has no experience, so that means that no one with experience wanted to come here. And I'm like, all I heard before this process was don't get another retread. And now it's like, now suddenly a bunch of people wanted a retread. Like, I don't remember hearing that. So that feels to me like a very convenient take where they were just going to rip the hire no matter what. Yeah. Because if it was a retread, you're going to rip it for, oh, they're just getting another retread. They're not creative enough. But now you go with Marco Sturm and it's, oh, he's a former player and they're not creative enough because they're just going with a former player. And it's like
cheap, yes, man.
Right. So it's like, I'm really curious because I didn't hear any of them outline it. I would love to know who the Bruins could have hired who would have satisfied that portion of media and even some fans who feel that way, because it feels like they were just going to rip it no matter what. And it's a bit lazy and kind of disingenuous. And I just want to like challenge people to try a little harder to have a good take on it. Like, if you want to rip it, that's fine. But like, you got to give me an alternative of what actually would have been good for them to do in this case.
Yeah. And let's be honest, like hockey is the 4th on most sports radio in the area's list of things that they know and care about and pay attention to. So not all of the takes are completely informed. I don't know if they even knew Marco Sturm was a coach, like once he wasn't on the Bruins, and I assume a lot of them lost track of him, if they even knew who he was before that, because we have a lot of football heavy guys. We have a lot of basketball heavy people. I think hockey is something that not a lot of people put that much effort into following. And obviously we know the business is to say things that creates a reaction, and it's really easy to get fans to engage with something negative because they already dislike Don Sweeney so much that it's like, of course he can't do anything right.
Yeah. Well, negativity drives the bus. It always has in sports talk. I mean, if I would even say on the Skate Pod, our most viewed and listened, downloaded episodes probably were on the heels of disappointing playoff upsets or somebody being fired or something where the narrative is inherently negative, as opposed to when the Bruins are playing well, or like it's negativity drives the bus. The New England Patriots were winning Super Bowls for 2 decades. I think they went to the Super Bowl, what was it, 9 times in 18 years, and they won 6 of them, and you turn on local radio and it's very seldom anything positive. So when it comes to the Bruins media and fans, Scott asked the question, what did they want? They didn't want any hire in particular for the most part. What they want is to complain and bitch about Don Sweeney. That to me is very evident. And I'm not here to say to people not to dislike Don Sweeney if you don't want to, or if you want to. I very much acknowledge that he has done plenty bad throughout his tenure. He's also done some good that people don't talk about or acknowledge, but it doesn't matter. He's a very polarizing individual. There's no doubt about it, and feel how you want to feel. But the reality is what Scott said is absolutely true. No matter who Don Sweeney hired, there was going to be a narrative against it. Scott said it. You hire Tortorella, Lavaliette, Rick Tocchet, Mike Sullivan.
You're struggling with the French names today.
Is it not Lavaliette?
I think Laviolette always trips Brian up a little bit.
Yeah,
What
Laviolette.
is it? What is it?
Laviolette.
What did I say?
You had like an extra L in there somewhere.
You like flipped like an L and an I or something. It was like
Lavaliette.
Laviolette.
Laviolette.
Whatever. It's all the same difference. But anyway, that would have been the lazy retread head coaching hire. And if they went cheap and young or inexperienced, the Bruins are cheap and they're just hiring somebody that they can tell what to do, make demands to, be a scapegoat for. And it's a lose-lose, because the reality is there's a big portion of Bruins fans that will not rest until Don Sweeney is let go and fired. And if that's how they want to act, that's great. It's a lot of wasted energy, in my opinion, because they just extended him and he's not getting fired until something else happens. So if you want to sit here and bitch and complain, go for it. But you're gonna be yelling in a room where no one's hearing you, because it doesn't matter. They've just extended the guy. So I think with Marco Sturm, I hear a lot of, oh, yep, cheap hire, inexperienced, and he's the old boys club. He golfs with the Bruins. Okay. Marco Sturm was traded from Boston in December of 2010. It's June of 2025. Like, he is not a Boston Bruins guy for the last decade and a half, and he was here for 5 years. But let's talk about that for a second. Why is being a Boston guy such a bad thing in this situation? Why do people talk about Marco Sturm being a former Boston Bruin like it's a bad thing? He is a player who has played here. He knows what the market expects. He knows what the fans expect. More importantly, he knows what the fans deserve. Why is that a bad quality in this hire, who, by the way, has absolutely earned his bones in international and domestic hockey coaching outside of head coach NHL experience? He's done everything else, and he's a very qualified player in his day, and he has a very qualified coaching mind right now. So who else did people want hired? Like, okay, Misha Donskov. All right. Misha Donskov doesn't have any head coaching experience at the AHL level, and he was focusing on going to the Stanley Cup Finals with Dallas a week and a half ago. So if you wanted Misha Donskov, yeah, he was an interesting candidate, but
I think most people probably don't even know who that we're talking about this. Probably don't even know who Misha Donskov is. If we're talking about like the media members in this area, I highly doubt.
So the outrage was inevitable.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and then like the next day, the topic became, why didn't they wait a little longer to see what happened with Pete DeBoer, who got fired the day after the Bruins announced the Sturm hire, which is fair, definitely, to an extent. Like, I think I said on here, I would have waited to see what happened in Dallas, because I would have at least wanted to talk to Pete DeBoer if he were available. Does that guarantee he would have ended up being the hire? Might not have been the right fit. Like, DeBoer obviously is a tougher coach, and in certain situations that is needed and can be a really good thing. I don't know if the Bruins are in that situation, right? Like, maybe having the younger coach, the up and comer, more of the players coach, developmental coach coming from the AHL, like, that may very well be better for where the Bruins are right now versus DeBoer, who, has won a lot of games, has gotten to a lot of conference finals, has obviously not won it all. There are questions about, is there kind of a ceiling where he takes you so far and then can't get over the hump? If I were a team that was closer to contention, though, I would certainly take my chances with DeBoer. But I don't think the Bruins are that close to contention. So I don't know. Like, you may have talked to him and decided, you know what, not really the right fit for us right now. Or DeBoer might even decide, you know what, I've gone through all this and I think I need to take a step back for a year and reevaluate things, maybe do media, maybe whatever. By the way, while still getting paid for Dallas because he has 1 year left. So that might not have worked out. And I do think just timing wise, the Bruins are already pretty far down the road with Marco Sturm. I do think they probably made their decision the week prior. And then most of last week was negotiating, ironing things out, finalizing the contract.
Yeah, and they probably think he's the better guy for the job. Like, and DeBoer wasn't fired at the time. You can make the educated guess he was about to for the way he went off on Ottinger, their franchise goalie in Dallas and whatnot. But you can't just wait for the prospect of somebody getting fired and that person's not even a fit. Ultimately, I don't know what Bruins fans want, because you have some Bruins fans that think the Bruins should just tear it down and rebuild. Okay, so why bring in an established coach for that team? You have other Bruins fans who think this team isn't that far away, pending on a good offseason and a creative offseason. But I do know what Bruins fans want. A lot of Bruins fans, like I said, they want Don Sweeney's job. And they're pessimistic because they don't have faith in him. And I'm not here to tell you not to. I just think the ultimate problem here is you have a lot of fans and media where they don't like the guy who is running the team that they love. And so, they want the Bruins to be good, but not at the expense of Sweeney succeeding. They want Sweeney to fail at his job so that they can get rid of Sweeney and then get somebody in here to do a better job for their team. But the problem is they just extended him. He's not going anywhere, at least right now. And Sweeney failing at his job means the on-ice product is failing. So it's a conflict of interest right now. And I just think that there's no move that Sweeney can do where people are going to say, yeah, it's a good move, because his relationship with the media and the fans, a lot of them, they just don't like the guy and he's in a lose-lose scenario. And that's just the reality. I'm just saying how it is. I'm not telling fans not to, but I see so many people out there talking about how the Bruins they're so bad. They finished 5th last in the league, and you'll hear their depth chart read on air, their winger depth chart. And while obviously it's not great, all of their center depth chart players are playing wing. There's an entire offseason to go. But the whole thing about the Bruins finishing 5th last year, they finished 5th last for the most part because the roster sucked. And it was a bad mix of players. And it was a lot of just anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. What seems to get ignored a lot of the times is that they were without their top 2 defensemen for most of the year in different parts. And by deadline day, their goal was to fall as far in the standings as possible, because they were 10th last in the standings at deadline day, and they fell by design, not players and coaches, but management. So it was a combination of underperformances, injuries, and by design that they finished 5th. Do you guys honestly look at this roster right now? Before, like, we all know free agency sells to happen in some trades. You guys know in your heart of hearts the Bruins come next year will not be icing a team that has the 5th worst roster in the league, or the 5th worst team. I don't see it happening. Not after what I've heard from ownership and management, in addition to knowing why they finished 5th last, not 10th. Because if they didn't sell the way that they did, they weren't finishing 5th last. So the roster needs work, but there's so many unknowns. So I think people need to kind of just let the summer come and go, and let's reassess what this roster looks like. Honestly, less than a month from now. We'll know a lot more about this team less than a month from now.
Yeah, it just stinks from Marco Sturm's perspective. He's coming in, and he'll have some support for sure. I did see also a lot of positive support. I even fans that I consider, like, that are in my friend group that I consider to be like pretty engaged fans, didn't know Marco Sturm was even a coaching possibility. So I think it might just take some time for people to wrap their head around. But also, I do feel bad that Sturm's coming into the situation that he is, because it's not the perfect situation to come into. Even though it's his former team or one of his former teams, he is going to be in a position where he's going to be under a microscope, and he's going to be tasked with putting together whatever new pieces come in this offseason, getting some of the current pieces to perform better than they did last year. There's a lot that he's going to have to do, and that he's going to be, scrutinized for if he doesn't do it correctly. And so he's not coming into an easy situation, that's for sure.
He's not, but I don't feel sorry for him at all. Like, he's getting an opportunity to be one of the 32 NHL head coaches.
I'm saying I feel bad for there's certain things he can't control that people have been negative about already.
Yeah, but it's all, I mean, there's always pressure, but it's not like he's coming in and everyone's like expecting him to win now. Like, I also think people are pretty realistic about that. Like, no one's this isn't like Jim Montgomery coming in where it's like the expectation is a deep playoff run, and anything short of that's going to be disappointing. Like, the expectations are much lower for the Bruins right now. That's just the reality of it. So yeah, there's going to be pressure on him, but it's a different kind of pressure. It's pressure to maximize whatever roster he's given. And yeah, eventually when they improve enough, it'll be pressure to win and go on a postseason run. But that's not what he's walking into.
Well, we don't really, that's my point though. We don't know exactly what he's walking into come October. Like, we need to see the roster shake out over the summer. I'm not predicting it's going to be a Stanley Cup contender with his expectations on him. But, if the roster is improved the way that we expect them to do so, and we will judge them harshly if this roster is not vastly improved come October. Not that every hole will be filled, but this team should be, like I said, the roster we saw in April after a sale, the deadline, is not the roster we're going to see in October. Once we start to see how that roster is unfolding, we'll have better expectations for Sturm in his first year. We just don't know that information at the moment. And that's why it's going to be, this is a fun summer. How many summers over the last, 15, 20 years watching the Bruins have we known 90+% of the roster that end of the season is coming back? It's safe to say, I have no idea what this roster is going to look like in a little bit here.
Yeah, we would spend most of our time being like, can they get Bertuzzi? Like, can they re-sign
Right.
Bertuzzi? And there's like one player you're talking about rather than
who's playing with Campbell and Thornton on the fourth line. That's what it was for a long time. But anyway, one other thing I want to keep in mind as well, and you guys will probably ask tomorrow at Sturm's availability, but the next shoe to drop is his coaching staff. I'm curious to see who those individuals end up being, and I could see the hires happening soon. I mean, it didn't take long for Joe Sacco and who else was named an assistant coach in New York?
David Quinn.
Okay, yeah. So they got their staff ironed out. That was a few weeks after I think Sullivan was hired, but I would anticipate that happening soon. So that's the next shoe to drop in Boston. I'm curious what's talked about tomorrow.
Yeah, same. That's definitely on my list of questions, and I'm sure a lot of reporters' list of questions is where they are with the staff. Do they know who's staying yet, if anyone? We assume goalie Bob is staying. I said on the last pod, I think Jay Leach is staying, but I don't know if that's a lock. And I don't really have a great feel on Chris Kelly one way or the other, honestly. So, they could potentially turn over like the entire staff or 2 spots, 3 spots. I've said before, I think hiring a power play specialist should be a priority for them. I wonder if it is. I wonder who they have in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, lots of interesting stuff to happen there.
Yeah, I'm excited for tomorrow, actually, for getting to when we actually get to firsthand ask the things that we've been kind of musing about over the last few weeks, and especially since the actual hiring was announced. We might be able to get the answers to stuff we've been talking about. So I'd also be curious just about, how conversations went with Sacco after, how do you tell him that he's not a finalist, or, there was a lot that went on in this process, and I'm interested to see what he says. So I guess we'll just plug. We'll probably be live tweeting. So if you follow us on Twitter, we'll be certainly posting content as soon as we are able to. And normally we'll throw up a few videos of the most important parts of it. So if you can't watch it, if you're at work or whatever, and you can't watch the Nesson feed, just pop onto Twitter. We normally try our best to put up the most important stuff.
All right. Any final thoughts from the two of you?
I mean, we haven't even touched on the Stanley Cup final and the fact that some guy named Brad Marchand scored the overtime winner in Game 2. Obviously, we are low on time here, and there'll be more time to react to the Stanley Cup final as it continues to go. But yeah, I mean, saw a lot of reaction of like, how did the Bruins not get more from Marchand? Look at the playoff run he's having, and no question, he's been awesome for Florida. We know why they didn't get more. Like, we can keep revisiting this, but he was injured at the time. There were questions about how long he was going to be out. And they also worked with him on going to a destination that he wanted to go to. And so, yeah, they probably didn't get as much as they could have. Certainly not as much as they would have had he been healthy. And not as much as they would have if they had just sent him wherever without his approval. Like, he had, I think, an 8-team no trade list. In theory, there could have been other options besides Florida, but they did Marchand a solid as a captain and a franchise legend, and worked with them. And like, you can debate whether that's right or wrong. Like, is being good to someone like Marchand, like, is that better for you in the long run, even if it doesn't maximize the return, or should you be ruthless businessman and trade him for the best return, whether he's happy about it or not? Like, you can have that debate, but like the whole thing of like, why didn't they get more? It's like, we know exactly why they didn't get more. So
right, yeah, it's a fun thing to do to be revisionist. But talk about the Panthers' depth. Sam Reinhart, I believe he's 8th on the Panthers in playoff scoring right now with 13 points. Sam Bennett leads the team with 19. Marchand, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Kachuk all have 17. Lundell 14, Luosterainen 14, Sam Reinhart 13, Evan Rodriguez 13. So I mean, man, that is how you do it.
Another huge move for Florida to get that done. I mean,
that's their entire top 9 just performing. That's just incredible stuff. Good for them, truly. We'll see if they win the cup, but man, it's no secret why that team is as successful as they've been.
Been a really interesting first 2 games too. So certainly closer than last year. So far, both games going to overtime. We don't have much time to talk about, but next game's tonight.
I hear crying Melvin again.
Yeah, I was gonna say I gotta let this man outside.
Yeah.
He is not happy. He's just crying in the background. So yeah, I think it's time to call it, but we'll talk Stanley Cup again.
Yeah, I mean, two incredible games. Like, legitimately one of the best starts to a Stanley Cup final I've ever seen. Like, you would be hard pressed to find a better first 2 games.
Yeah.
Bruins Canucks was a good start.
Yeah.
Overtime, and then Rafi Torres scored like dying seconds of game 1. Burrows scores seconds into game 2 in overtime. Obviously, that series was amazing, 1-7 outside of the Bruins bias. And
I mean, Bruins Blackhawks was a great start too.
I know. What was that? 3 overtimes, game 1.
Yeah.
And then was that overtime again, game 2? Daniel Paille?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That was one of the best non-7 game series I think you could probably find. All right. Yeah, I know. I hear Melvin crying, so we'll get out of here. Game 3, Oilers and Panthers tonight, so we can react to that next time we speak as well. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.